So good morning everyone. It's Friday the 18th of October, and yesterday morning after coming down to my work site here on the way home, I received two bits of good news. And the first little bit of good news was from Stefan, that the Stefan Racket has been repainted. And more importantly, from the topic of this YouTube, is that a date's been finalised now for the unveiling of the Ken Fletcher Bust at Ken Fletcher Park. Now that date is the 29th of December 2013. It is at 9 a.m. in the morning, an hour before the Brisbane International opens on the second day of the tournament for the 2013-14 year. And the day should be just quite interesting from everyone's perspective, because I've gone to quite a lot of trouble to make sure that the plaques around the plinth of the bust told the story of Ken Fletcher. And I just thought it was good to start this YouTube with a quote from Alan Jones, and the quote comes from the Australian Story transcript, which is on the web. And what Alan says is, at the end of the day, I think Fletcher was one of those people who thought that good friends and good times were perhaps not better there, but as good results. We were all mates together, and so we all still talk about him. So he's alive, even though he's physically not with us. And Alan, I hope that you're watching the YouTube and that you think that your words that you've spoken there are prophetic as we move through the YouTube here. And with that, we'll move off to the next little segment. So here we are underneath Stefan's Sky Needle, and yesterday Stefan sent me a photo of the Stefan Racket, and yes, it is as big as it looks. It's amazing, and it was the world's biggest tennis racket in its day when it first went up. And the connection through all of this is obviously Frew Park, and Frew Park is where Milton was situated, and Milton is where Ken Fletcher honed his game. And if you read the books that Hugh Lunn's written, you'll understand that Ken practiced furiously at home, but travelled by tram mostly to Milton, got off the tram and then practiced and won lots of his games in his earlier career at Milton. And I was just so excited when Stefan sent me the photo, and then not 5 minutes later, as I said before, I got the phone call from the council officer to tell me of the date. Now, as it happens, when I was negotiating the dates, I actually am not in Brisbane on the date, and the reason for that is because I love my son dearly, and when he and Isabella, my daughter, accompanied me down to Melbourne to pick up the bust, we didn't get time to see the aircraft museum out at Williamstown, and I promised Nathan I'd take him back down there and show it to him, and all of this work that I do is but for naught without Nathan and Isabella's involvement. So that is a promise I'm keeping. Now, what I thought I'd do before we move on to the next little bit is just read another excerpt out of the Australian Story transcript. And this excerpt is from Hugh Lunn, and it's as follows. I think Chuck saw that Ken was a good man who he'd be friends with and was, down on his uppers. So Chuck employed him. Ken sort of had the idea that he talked Chuck into coming to see Brisbane, but Chuck told me, I thought the boy should come home. And so they both come out here. Ken showed Chuck around Brisbane, and Chuck said, I want you to be my man in Australia. And he brought Ken a penthouse. Now, that's the end of the quote, but what you then find is that Chuck's incredible vision and incredible generosity took seed for its Australian leg in Brisbane, and we are just so lucky that he did. And that was one of the reasons why my ears pricked up when the Lord Mayor announced that they were going to develop a park next to the tennis centre, and I then spoke to him about naming the park after Ken Fletcher, and he says, well, you know, if you can get some support for it, we'll have a look at it. And we did, you know, a couple of thousand indications of support through emails and other petitions that we collected, and it was just a magic response. And it's, as I said, it's all coming together really quite wonderful. Now, let's move on. So we're out here at the Brookfield Tennis Centre, and believe it or not, what you're about to see is just a pure piece of Australian history. A pure piece of Brisbane history and Queensland history, and it's the restored ticket office from Milton. So here we are, and this is the rigid-edged ticket office from the Milton Tennis Court, and Ken Fletcher would have walked past this hundreds of times on his way into tennis practice, on his way into games, and it's been fully restored out here, and it is just a magical little bit of history. So in conclusion, I just thought I'd read this little quote from Hugh Lunn, again out of the Australia Story transcript. Well, 1963 was Kenny's biggest year as a tennis player. He was seeded 3 at Wimbledon. He and Margaret Court won in Australia. Then they went and won in France on the clay. Then they went and won on the grass at Wimbledon. And then they went to the United States to try to become the first players to ever win the Grand Slam mixed doubles. Margaret was ready for the final, and Ken turned up. "G'day, Marg, running a bit late, been out." And she said, "Ken, you haven't even shaved." And Ken said, "Shaved?" He said, "I haven't even been to bed, Marg." However, they did go on to win that event and win the Grand Slam of mixed doubles. That was the sort of person Ken was. Just a great, magnificent tennis player, but a real Australian, I reckon. And so with that, I hope that you can turn up at 9 a.m. on the 29th of December and pay tribute to Ken when the Lord Mayor unveils the bust. Thank you.